ASL interpreter, Ryan, and we're going to make sure that you have an informative and engaging conversation this evening. And so just know, so you know, we have a couple of things that you should be aware of. If you look to your right, you will see some information. It says chat, Q&A, polls, and people. And so if you were interested in learning who's in the room, just check to your right and click people. If you would like to ask a question in particular, please put that in the Q&A. Don't put it in the chat. We want to be able to easily pull these questions out for you, and the chat is for you to engage with everyone. So I am Candy Lewis, CEO of Positive Results Center, and we address trauma from a cultural and age perspective. Tonight, we're going to be talking about housing insecurities. But before we do that, I want to thank our sponsors, including our lead sponsor, SoCal Gas, Kaiser Permanente, LA Care, the Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation, Supervisor Hilda Solis, Los Angeles Business Journal, Forgiving for Living, the Neighborhood Housing Services, Mac Enterprises, Sweet Life, the Kinsey Collection, and of course, my partners, the Black Women Leaders of Los Angeles, and my amazing team and family. I would like to thank you all. We're going to just jump right into this conversation because it is so deep and there's so many levels, and we have some great participants here today. But before we really start, I'd like to bring up someone who is very special to me personally and also to Positive Results Center. And that is our lead sponsor, Miss Susan Cifuentes Trigueros, and she is the Senior Regional Affairs Manager for SoCal Gas. Susan, come on up.
Thank you, Ms. Candy, and it's a pleasure to be here. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of SoCal Gas, we're really excited to support Positive Results Center's social justice conversations. Tonight, we are discussing housing insecurity. And you might ask, what interest does SoCal Gas have in this issue? Well, first and foremost, SoCal Gas cares about and is part of every community we serve. Our employees live, work, and play in the greater LA area and regionally throughout our service territory. And from our perspective, housing is a basic human need. Each of us should have a safe and healthy place to live and raise a family. That makes available and affordable housing an important conversation. And sustaining the affordability of that household is important as well. This is where energy, affordability, and reliability comes in. There's been much discussion and public policy to address cleaning our environment. And a clean environment is also a quality of life issue. Some advocate for a singular pathway and want to electrify everything. So let me just be clear. SoCal Gas is not against electrification, but we absolutely think it should be a choice and not a mandate. SoCal Gas is advancing solutions and investing in infrastructure and innovative technologies to maintain a system that delivers for our customers affordable, reliable, and clean energy, and energy that all our communities deserve. So at this time, if the supervisor is ready, I can introduce her, but if not, I'll kick it back over to Candy.
Thank you so very much, Susan. We appreciate you. We appreciate your support, and we are in full support of all of the programs and services SoCal Gas offers. And Supervisor Holly Mitchell is going to be joining us in just a moment. technology is special and different. And so we're having just a little bit of technical difficulties, but she should be joining us in just a moment. While we're waiting for her, let me just say this. And I don't know how many of you all know that, where are my notes on this? That in Los Angeles Los Angeles County has 10% of all of the homeless population in the United States. And our homeless population is growing. Some people think homelessness and housing insecurity are just people who are living in tents or on the side of the freeways. But also, there are people that are couch surfing. That means that you don't have a place that you could really call home, that you might be staying with friends and family, or maybe your classmates. There are so many children as well as transitional age youth that are homeless. And so we really want to bring awareness to everyone. And we're going to have a great conversation about this. I'm super excited about all of our participants. And hopefully the supervisor will be joining us any moment now. So I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move this conversation on. And I'm going to bring up our first guest. Our first guest is a dear friend of mine. She is a warrior in the streets. And so I'd like to bring up Miss Tiffany Duvernay Smith.
Hello. Hi, Candy. Thank you so much. How's my sound? Can you hear me good? Okay, great. So, Candy, are you going to come to the stage with me? Oh, there you are. Woohoo!
You see me?
I see you now. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yes, thank you so much. Tiffany,
Yes.
so what I like you to do is I always like people to share who they are. I don't want to introduce you because you know exactly who you are and what you want to share. So take a moment and tell us who you are and tell us a little bit about your plight in life.
So we're going to start with my name again, Tiffany Duvernay Smith, and I am a systems reform advocate. And I did research on definitions and everything to come up with something to describe myself and what I actually do, right? And I would say that my why is very spiritual. It's connected to the scriptures, and it's also connected to my life experiences with domestic violence and homelessness, which affected my mental well-being. So that's mental health, depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And then also criminal justice reform, because I had law enforcement contact and probation and anger management, community service. I married somebody incarcerated 34 years. So all of my passions together, along with my advocacy, make me a systems reform advocate. And I would say, like, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm just here to love the community
Yeah.
and be a voice for people who are not speaking up for themselves and their experiences, because I believe that change is possible on a
Yeah.
system level so
Yeah.
that we can be affected, on the ground.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Tiffany.
Thank
And
you.
you do a great, great job at all that you do.
Thank
So I just want to acknowledge you and your heart.
you.
Those of you who have ever met Tiffany, you know that she just loves people and she wants the best for everyone. And I really want to just say thank you for that, Tiffany. And then I would like you to tell us a little bit about your background and how you became homeless.
Okay. So I feel like I'm one of those people that you wouldn't expect to be homeless. Like I left home at 17, um, very independent, started going to school, just realizing I was really on my own. And so I chose the workforce instead of education. And I got involved in corporate America, bookkeeping, purchasing and planning, different aspects of accounting, and customer service. And so I always describe it as money, numbers, and spreadsheets, just really in my bread and logical. And people say, well, what do you do? And I would just be like, that's what I do.
Right.
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 And so a rent paying person, you know, had my own place, had a car, you know. And so that was just my background. And so, I met this guy, right? Very charming, and I fell in love, and it turned into toxic relationship. All the words that you want to say besides domestic violence: toxic, unhealthy, dysfunctional, you know.
Mhm.
And
But
then
but it all means
abusive,
domestic violence in an
right?
abusive relationship, right?
Exactly. And I say that because I know that there are people who make excuses for what they're experiencing. And, that's something I want to change too. I believe in breaking patterns and
Yes.
cycles and chains. I believe in breaking strongholds and footholds and chokeholds. I believe in reprogramming our brain and overcoming trauma and coming out okay on the other side, even if you have residue, right? But coming out okay on the other side and making it through. And so empowerment is what I believe in empowerment too. And so as far as how I became homeless,
Hmm?
I
One
was
second.
arguing every morning with this guy and being late to work, and so I got fired.
Wow. Excuse me 1 second. Tiffany, I'd like you to continue on.
Okay.
I've got the supervisors on the other line, so I'm going to step off the stage. But Tiffany, continue on and not only talk about that, but talk about the assistance, okay?
Okay. I'll talk about everything. And so let me see, trying to pick back up where I was. So I ended up getting fired from my job and getting on unemployment. And when I ran out of my unemployment, I was wondering, okay, so what's going to happen because I'm not working and I'm running out of unemployment. So my rent also went up $100 that same month. So I just want to bring attention to that there doesn't have to be a dramatic rent increase for someone to be evicted. It was just $100 that I could not afford. So that's how I became homeless. And began sleeping in my car, which is very, demoralizing and things like that. I had someone talk to me about dignity, and they were rude when they did. Um, I experienced reverse discrimination just when I would seek help. Like I wasn't going in, like this, but I was still looking decent. Like I'm going somewhere to seek assistance. So I'm
Right.
going to bathe. I'm going to wear earrings. I had on a dress and some sandals one time, and they went and got the director of the program, the person doing the intake, and she told me, she was like, look at your earrings, look at your dress, look at your shoes. And I'm like, I'm not lying about being homeless and not having money. Like, hello, you know.
Hmm.
Um, that's something that I experienced. And I've just answered that question. I haven't moved on.
Yeah, that's
Just
good.
letting you know where I am in. you know,
Yes.
telling my experience.
So, well, what resources did you use to get housed?
So I'm going to back up to the Department of Social Services. I I was in this relationship for 5 years before I started trying to break up with him.
Mhm.
And when I decided to end it, I went back and forth for 4 or 5 months. And at this time, I went to the Department of Social Services for cash and food stamps. And I told my worker what I was experiencing. She had me fill out a form and referred me to prototypes. And
Mm.
so Department of Social Services was a resource for me. And they told me, don't worry about looking at a job. Don't worry about looking for work and doing all this reporting to get these benefits. Go get your domestic violence services, and we're going to categorize you under mental health, which is categorized as needs special assistance, and
Mm.
just go take care of yourself. So I was grateful for that opportunity. And I filled out applications for housing because they knew that I was experiencing homelessness. And it took 2.5 years to get the call.
So, I have a question, and I may have missed this when I was off stage, and I apologize. When you were homeless, what did that look like? Were you living on the streets? Were you couch surfing? Were you going from motel to motel? How was that showing up for you?
So all that, all that, it really showed up for me in just it like a break from reality. Like I'm was totally clueless about the streets.
Yeah.
I'm all, you know, hurt spiritually. Like, God, why are you letting this happen to me? I'm blaming myself because I'm realizing my decisions got me here. So
Mhm.
part of how it looked is all internal.
Yes.
It wasn't, there's no pretty. There was no pretty. And so I started off in my car and parked in front of someone's house, which is, why won't you let me in your house? you know,
Right.
I, I could sleep on your floor, but it was somewhere where I felt safe. But still, are people driving by knowing that I'm in my car at night, and
Yeah.
neighbors and things like that, right? Then parking in someone's driveway, and a friend letting me like off of her dining area was like a little room that was big enough, barely, you know, for a little
Yeah.
twin bed to squeeze in between the walls.
Yes.
So I would stay there. And then also, I was afraid of a shelter. I was
Yes.
afraid of fighting and my belongings being stolen. And I was afraid of how it would affect me mentally because I was already going through something. And I'm like, what is it going to mean if I'm in a shelter and dealing with the reality that it's me, And it has to do with judgments that other people have and
Yes.
self-judgment and condemnation, And so couch surfing. And, I had some opportunities to like give my whole check to share a room with strangers. I did that.
So, and I really want to thank you for elaborating because I think a lot of time people don't understand the whole trajectory or the levels of being without a home and
Hmm.
all the different things that you have to go through. And we're going to bring up our second guest in a little bit, but I want you to talk a little bit weave in the healing, your journey to advocacy and employment, and what you're doing now and how you're helping people.
I want to put an age on this. So
Okay.
earlier I said I was 17 when I left home.
Hmm.
So I was 37 just before I turned 37. So I was 37 when I became homeless. So this is 20 years of doing my thing and then all of a sudden getting knocked all the way back.
So you're saying for 20 years you've worked. You took care of all of the responsibilities and then found yourself midlife without a home.
Exactly.
That was devastating, I can imagine.
Right. Definitely. So my healing journey and my advocacy. So I intentionally sought therapy
Nice.
because I knew I was affected by my circumstances.
Hmm.
So I intentionally sought therapy for depression. I intentionally sought therapy for PTSD.
Okay.
I had 40 sessions with one person about PTSD. I stayed in support groups for 5 years, sometimes like 4 days a week. So I was very, very determined. And I think, the trauma involved in knowing you're about to be homeless and actually being homeless and wanting to be housed or getting housed, it's so, we use the word trauma
Yeah.
freely nowadays, but really, I knew that I was just not myself, like not at all. And I'm like, how do I get back to Tiffany? I'm not her anymore. Why
Mm.
did I pick this person and stay with him so long? And I see women pick the same person in another guy all the time. And I was like, I hope I never have to do that again because I was afraid that I was going to kill this guy
Mm.
because the visions I was having. That's what let me know I needed to leave. And then my aunt had a discussion with me about thinking that she had knocked out this same boyfriend twice, hit his head on a doorknob, hit his head on a coffee table during a tussle. So I
And
started getting afraid that I'm not going to make it. I'm going to be incarcerated. I'm going to get hurt, and it made me leave.
and let me just acknowledge that that is real. That a good percentage, and I don't have the excuse me the exact number, but I know that 60% of all women that are in prison for hurting or killing their partner, their abusive partner, I should say. So Tiffany, we have about 4 more minutes.
Okay.
So
I
can
want
you
to continue. So I would say that all of the support groups that I was in it was very healing for me. Awareness was everything. I learned so much. Like, woo. After I started going to these domestic violence courses and learning about healthy relationships, 90 days in, I said it's 5 years, right? But 90 days in is when I left. And not because somebody told me to. I was
yes.
like, okay, my is not that. And I believe in love and healthy relationships. It's time to go. So that's how I left. So that's 2012. So 2014, police brutality had me broke down crying and trying to figure out what to do. So I started participating in public safety and justice committee meetings and mental health committee meetings with the Empowerment Congress under Mark Ridley Thomas. And
Yes.
in the mental health arena, they're talking about homelessness, and I've been homeless before. So it's like, while I was homeless, I started advocating. And this is the beginning of my journey. And so I
Okay, before
advocate.
wait. I'm sorry. For those that don't know, we don't want to assume that anyone understands. What does advocating mean?
I had a good definition yesterday. Well, it means what it looks like is I'm sitting around the community and decision makers. And in the meeting, they offer public comment. So being
Yes.
able to speak for sometimes 1 minute, most times 2 minutes, sometimes 3 minutes, whatever my opinion is, whatever my passion is about what's going on around the table, and trying to influence the changes that are on the table and
Yes.
bringing new awareness that they may not know about, because I'm on the ground in the community and I'm the one that knows what's going on. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've been able to advocate on a city, county, state, and federal level, and do consulting just from a lived experience perspective. One consulting opportunity had to do with racial equity. And so, I know you're going to bring Zion on, but I don't know if you want to talk about racism right
So,
now or later or.
well, let me just tell you, we're still having technical difficulties
Okay.
with some of our speakers, and Zion may or may not be joining us. So, if you could just talk very briefly about racism as you saw it, as you experienced it, and then we're going to move on, and hopefully our supervisor will be available, or
Okay.
maybe Zion.
So I'm getting a definition here. Um, well, I don't want to say necessarily how I experienced it as much as I know it exists, right?
Okay.
Which is I believe that all of our systems are racist and all of our systems are criminogenic. And the definition of that is of a system, situation, or place causing or likely to cause criminal behavior. And I believe it's strategic to cause people to only be able to respond and react certain ways and then get in trouble for it. And it's Black people. So my advocacy for Black people right now is that you're only as strong as your weakest link. And the way Black people have been treated in slavery, up until now, they can be looked at, quote unquote, as the weakest link or the bottom of the totem pole. And I happen to believe that if you take care of Black people, let's talk about homelessness, right? If you take care of Black people, everybody else is going to be taken care of.
That
So
is very true.
this new Black, Indigenous, people of color, it's like lumping people together, and it's still not acknowledging Black people. So I would love to do a homeless sweep on Black men.
Oh
Black men
my
been
goodness.
bogged out for so long. Do something. Do
Right.
something to say we repent. Do something to say we are really anti-racist. We're so anti-racist, we're going to go on a campaign to house Black men, and guess what? Everybody else is going to get taken care of in the process, because that's the way it goes when you act that out.
Now, Tiffany, thank you so much for all that you have brought to the table. You have about 30 seconds left. Is there something that you would like to close with?
Just encouraging the listeners to do the work and to get in there and help, because I believe we all have justice and love running through our veins. And there's so much that we can do to help enact justice and to show people that we love them.
Yes. Thank you so much. And Tiffany, I love you. Thank you so much. I'm excited for your future. I'm excited for the future of you and your partner, your husband, the love of your life. And I wish you very, very, very well. But
Thank
now,
you.
you be sure to tell Thomas I said hi. Now, I'd like to bring up our guest. I wasn't sure we were going to be able to get him. His system has been acting up, but you know what? We are honored to bring up Mr. Zion Capers. Come on up,
Yeah,
Zion.
thank
Hey,
you.
how you doing?
I'm not too bad. Thank you for asking. How
Thank
about yourself?
you. And let me say thank you for continuing to work and try to get here today. I appreciate that and I honor you. So why don't you introduce yourself, and let me just tell you, we have about 10 to 12 minutes with you. So
Okay.
why don't you tell us who you are and tell us how you overcame homelessness? And if you at some point or another thought that was just going to be your fate.
Okay. Well, I'm Zion Capers. I'm currently 22. From Los Angeles, California. And the beginning of the journey of homelessness for me was at the age of 18. 18, we had disputes between the family branch and I'd say communicative status between us for like the longest. Everyone usually stayed to themselves. They didn't really care to reach out and, see how we're doing and how we feel today. A lot of the aspects was of it that she couldn't be there for her children either, as well as me. And that's what low-key pushed me away into homelessness with the aspect of not having someone to lead me. So I had to like lead myself. And that made me self-sufficient, which is I had to do it by myself. I couldn't no longer depend on my parents. I had to leave the house, which is a flop, start to get it by myself. I started to do little things like look online instead of playing video games, search up something I could be doing in the meantime, like community service, volunteering as a TA for my school. It'd be sports, something of those sorts, just getting out of the house a little more, not being there, having that feeling and mindset dwell on you that it's inevitable. Because at that moment, like my psyche, it wasn't in the healthiest place. Just that environment which non-communicative, arguments, yelling, like no one getting through to each other. It was just always a constant, like I'd say, uprising and somebody being right.
Mhm.
Someone had to be right. And I was just didn't want it to be me. I wasn't going to make a point or anything. I just left the house. I got a job at the age of 19 due to being incarcerated in foster services. I was in a group home, DCFS, all kind of things. Like it was just it was a slow grind and getting out of there. They actually fought and got me back. And after I graduated high school, after I got out of juvenile hall, which was at the age of 17, I turned my life around. I started to make positive changes, like going to vocational training schools and learning horticulture, art 1, art 2. What I want to be is a motivational speaker or a clinician, therapist, etc. Just talking to people is always a good thing for me. That's just like a stressor, a stress reliever, not a stress. I'm sorry. That's like something I could always do to make me feel better and not remember those hard times that I had to overcome.
Can I ask you a question, Zion?
No problem.
You said overcome those hard times. If you look back, what do you think was really your hardest time? What really like was a change? I don't know the word I'm looking for, but what was the defining time that was the worst that made you want to make a difference?
My turning point. My turning point was when I was doing those bad things and I was faced in front of a judge and jury to get prosecuted for the crimes I committed. And that was just like, it's whether you're going to get it right now or you're never going to get it right. That was enough for me to realize that I don't want to live that life anymore. I want to change, turn around,
Yeah.
It was the year. It was a year in jail with 1 felony and a strike. It was like those 3 things right there. Those will take a lot of dreams from you. Like you can't really do anything or be what you want to be when you have those burdens upon you. like a strike, you can't get a good job. A felony, no one wants you to work with them, you know. And a year, that's just taken away from your good times you could be having.
Yeah. So let me just lift up a couple of things. I'm looking in the chat, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to look in the chat earlier, Tiffany, because there were some great things that people were mentioning about you. But Zion, one of my mentors and my friends, Miss Bernita Walker, says, Zion, you are to be lifted for your tenacity. You are already a motivational speaker. You know, I love that you said that you wanted to be a motivational speaker because of things that have happened to you. You know that you can influence and change other people's minds, and people are clapping up and talking about your maturity at such a young age. So let me just inspire you to let you know that you're doing a great job. So what keeps your mind off of situations, and how do you stay focused?
Usually what keep me focused is my peers around me, the things I do that contribute towards that. Like I like drawing. That it would take my mind away from doing bad things, having bad thoughts that leads to bad things, and just being responsible too. Like, you know, I get up each and every day and I actually have to put the work into wanting to go to work. I don't just get up and just have the energy and ability to just be like, all right, work is work. You know, I want to be like, oh, I want to go to work. I want to get it out the way and come back home to what I love. You know?
Yeah. Awesome. So you know what? I'm loving this conversation, and I want to bring Tiffany back up. I want to bring both of you up together to have this conversation, and just very briefly, maybe spend about another 5-6 minutes. So Tiffany, can you come on back up?
They turned my camera back on.
Tiffany, did we catch you while
husband
you were
just brought
eating?
me some food, so this is a keep it real moment right now.
Do you know what? It's always about keeping it real. That is the best when we keep it real. When we little take off our little makeup and we just like put it out there and just we're just really real with it. And that's why I brought you on, Tiffany, because you ain't the one who play. So you can go ahead and take a bite of whatever it is you're eating. I want to ask both of you together. When you were without a home, what do you think was the hardest for you? And also, how do you think people just on the street looked at or treated you? Either one.
You want to go first? Or me too.
I'm like, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go first. So being looked at as homeless, I never was the type of person that felt like, I mean, even though I was homeless, I never felt like I was homeless. I felt like I was just without a place to rest my head. Like it was always somewhere I could, like on my journey of being homeless, like, I don't necessarily feel like I was ever without a home. Like, you know, I always had people who were willing to help as long as I helped myself. Like, you know, instead of just laying around, you know, not doing nothing for myself, just waiting for a handout or a helping hand. You know, I had to raise myself up, have integrity, doing the right thing when no one's looking. Like that goes a long way. I had to not care what people thought. I just had to go do what I had to do. I had to go apply for a shelter. I had to make sure I had enough money saved to buy some food real quick that's going to last me through the week, whatever, etc. I need a bit of that for the bus fare to get to that scheduled interview I had. You know, maybe I could go to someone's house, ask them do they need the car washed, their lawn raked or something like that, just to get some clothing for the interview or something. Just always thinking ahead is just kept me going. Just, you know, always wanting something better. And that's what I still strive for today. So that's what got me working, got me toward the positive mindset, wanting to, you know, have a house over my head, bigger dreams, not just I'm gonna settle for this because this is what's in front of me. I take it day by day. I don't like live in the future, the past. I mean, I reminisce, but it's not too good to just think too much about like what was. I have what's now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And before you answer, Tiffany, I'd like to encourage our audience to remember that we do have a question and answer session. So if you be sure to put your questions and answers in this part that says Q&A so we can ask Tiffany or Zion a question. So Tiffany, love to hear your thoughts.
Um, I will say that I never acted like I was not homeless with people who knew me. Honest, vulnerable, right?
Right.
Of course, with the chosen few. And I had some thoughts that came up when I was thinking about that. It's a conversation I had with a friend of mine who's present a couple of weeks back about gratitude. So if you go north on La Brea, after you pass San Vicente, on the left-hand side, there's a McDonald's.
Yes. Yes.
I'm so grateful for that McDonald's because their bathrooms are on the outside. So I could just go in to use the restroom or go in and freshen up for the day and change my clothes. I'm grateful for that McDonald's. And I don't know who was watching me, but where I was staying in my car, I would have to drive around to that McDonald's to use the restroom. I'm also grateful for a friend of mine who let me take showers at her place. So sometimes you can't live with people because of whatever circumstances, right? Lease agreements and things like that.
Yes.
But she would let me shower. So just to be honest, I remember I hadn't bathed in like 5 days and she let me come take a shower. So I had known her since I was 3 years old.
Yeah.
She's like a sister to me, and will go down in history as my most non-judgmental friend.
Thank
And I
you.
don't even know if I answered your question.
Well, you know what? What you answered was real and it was honest. And I'm thankful that you both lifted up that because I know people don't think about everything that someone who does not have a home, as Zion said, you don't have a place to rest your head. That it's hard. It's hard for a youth. It's hard for a woman. It's hard for a person of color. And I thank all of the restaurants and the gyms that allow people to come in to have a space where they can freshen up their hygiene. Because it could be any one of us. They're in my neighborhood when I walk every morning. There is one person who is in a very nice car and he sleeps in that car in the same spot every day. And you sometimes you say this or you say that, but you just don't know that person's truth and you don't know how they got there. And everyone is different. So I thank you both for coming to share. I don't see any questions for you all, but there's a lot of love in the chats. So before we bring you down, oh, and let me just also acknowledge Selena Flowers, who is our ASL interpreter. Thank you so much, both Selena and Ryan, for doing an amazing job. But Zion, do you have any parting thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yes, I do. I feel like it was a pleasure to be here and speak my story with you guys. I felt like I had a lot of support from you guys, and that's all I asked for. I appreciate it.
Thank you. You know what? I want to know because I can't I can't let you go down until you tell us the organization that has been helping you and tell us
Okay.
what you love about them.
The organization that has I'm sorry, been helping me throughout my journey for about 7, 8 months now is Sanctuary of Hope. I have wonderful staff here. I'm amazed. They're so helpful. Like I actually have people who, pressure me to want to actually do better things for myself rather than settle for the bare minimum. Like, okay, I could have one job. I could barely get by check to check, or you could just get another job. Push yourself. Don't settle for what's in front of you. Settle for what you could keep grabbing and reaching for. Like Rhea, she's a wonderful. Andre, he's awesome. Leela, amazing. She always keeps me uplifted. Everyone does. It's never no really bad vibes here, and that's what I really admire. People actually come work professional here. They don't bring their problems here. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. And Tiffany, can you give us any 1 minute parting thought? And then you can get back to your dinner.
Okay, so I want to say something about Nzinga, warrior queen of Matamba. She was trained to be a queen, and she kept a diary. That's the way the story goes. And the Portuguese wanted to take her people and make them slaves. It's a longer story than this, but the bottom line is that she fought on the front line of the army until she was 80. You will not take my people. And she is the reason that I call myself Warrior Queen. The
So you
spirit
were,
of Nzinga is all up in me.
yes, it really is. I thank you so very much. I appreciate you and Zion for being here. And so, Tiffany, thank you. So, right now, we're going to go ahead before we transition into our next group. I want to let you know that we are so sorry. Um, we are not going to be able to bring on Supervisor Holly Mitchell. We're having some technical difficulties, and we do apologize. We have full intentions of bringing Supervisor Mitchell back. Hopefully, she will be back on our next presentation. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring up one of our polls. So we have a couple of polls, and we would really like you all to take a moment to answer our poll. So we should have it up any second now. Okay. So what we'd like to know is, are you experiencing challenges with finding affordable housing? I see you all responding. Thank you so much. Yes, we're going to do another poll. Have you all answered? Give you another maybe 10 seconds. Okay, we're still answering. We're still responding. We're good? Okay, so let's bring up our second poll. So our second question is, should more funding go to provide resources or services? So that poll is closed. We'll get that second poll up. Also, while we're waiting on that second poll, I don't know if you guys noticed up there, but it says check out PRC or donate now. You can actually be on this website, or excuse me, be in this virtual world, continue to watch our event, and also you can check out PRC. But now we have our poll up. So should more funding or resources go to provide services to homeless people and homeless programs? Also, you may notice that we're excited. We want to welcome everyone who's watching us on Facebook. So we are streaming live on Facebook, but we really want you to be here with us because you're missing out this great platform. You're not able to chat with us, and we want to hear your questions. So should more funding go to resources and homeless people? Yes, and then we're going to do one more survey. Okay, and so this is our final poll for this moment. Do you pay more than 30% of your income to rent? Okay, I'd love for everyone to respond to this question. Do you pay more than 30% of your income to rent? And after this, we're going to bring up our next panel. And our next panel includes Janet Kelly, Clifton Trotter, and Kata Roma. And I'll be introducing them in a moment. Okay, so it looks like we have people that have responded. Give it another 25 seconds. And then we can go ahead and close that poll. So I'd like to remind you, you could look right up above us and you could check out PRC, visit our website and learn more about the work that we do. Also, you can click donate now. If you make a donation, that donation will go to Positive Results Center for us to continue to provide these resources. I also want to thank our guests who were in our lounges and our lounge presenters. What we want you to do is come on a little early. You'll have an opportunity to participate in some meditation. And I know we are so busy all day long. So to be able to go into a room and have some great meditation, some woosah, so you could just coast through the rest of the evening is great. And meet some of the community partners and learn about the resources. And if you have a BIPOC, a Black, Indigenous, people of color, Asian, Persian, if you are a person of color and you want to partner with us, you want to participate in this program, you want to be a panelist, or you would like to have a lounge, please contact us at info@prc123.org. So now I'd like to bring up our next panel. And again, I apologize sincerely that Supervisor Holly Mitchell was not able to join us this evening, but I promise you she will be back soon. So we're going to go ahead and start with Clifton Trotter. And we're going to bring up Kata Roma. And we're going to bring up Janet Kelly in just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests. And so I'm going to start with Miss Kata. And Miss Kata is with, I have it here. She is with SAGE, which is the Strategic Action for a Just Economy. And Mr. Clifton Trotter is with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and that's called LASA. And Janet Kelly, who will be joining us in a moment, is with Sanctuary of Hope. So Kata, why don't you go ahead and take a moment, introduce yourself, and tell us what is Stay Housed LA?
Thank you, Candy, and thank you for having me at this wonderful event. So my name is Catalina Romo, and yes, I am from SAGE, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, and we work in South Los Angeles. And I'm so excited to tell you today about another part of my role, which I work under, called Stay Housed LA. And through that, we're able to provide resources to residents all across LA County to educate people on their rights as tenants. So to say in other words, Stay Housed LA County is a partnership between the County of Los Angeles and local community groups like SAGE or SAHE, which I'm housed at. And we also collaborate with legal service providers. So it's the first time that something like this is happening in LA County, where you have community-based organizations collaborating with legal service providers and the county to provide a service of eviction prevention, which is a combination of legal support, education, and resources, all with the goal of keeping people in their homes. And I do want to touch on the story behind Stay Housed LA, because there's so much power in stories, and even me being able to listen today to folks share their testimony and their stories. When listening, I always find my own agency, how to help myself better and how to help others. So behind Stay Housed LA is a campaign called Right to Counsel. And this group of folks in their agency, they noticed there's a gap in Los Angeles for tenants. And there's other communities in San Francisco and New York that have noticed this. They have fought campaigns and they have won, and they have right to counsel in San Francisco and New York, which means that when tenants go to court, they're going to have legal support. But currently in Los Angeles, when tenants go to court for an issue with housing, they're often not represented. Lawyers, landlords are represented 90% of the time, while tenants currently are only represented 10% of the time. And the outcome in court, it's going to go with who has legal support. So it's just not a just process. It's not a fair process. So the campaign is called Right to Counsel, and they've been fighting for this. And right now, as a temporary measure under LA County, has permitted Stay Housed LA to operate during this emergency time of COVID-19. And the hope and the desire is that this becomes permanent. So I'll touch more on that later, but that's what Stay Housed is.
Well, we hope that this stays permanent as well. It is truly needed. I went to court one day and just to watch, just to observe. And I noticed that there were so many attorneys representing people that had money, and those that didn't have money, those who are renting, who are about to be evicted, it almost felt like they were at the mercy of everyone. And that's really, truly not fair. So I'm glad that program is here. So let me jump on over to Mr. Clifton Trotter. Hello, Mr. Clifton. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you both here. So Clifton, why don't you take a moment, introduce yourself, and then also tell us about how social injustice contributed to housing insecurity.
No problem. Thank you. I'm Clifton Trotter. I'm the new Director of Equity at LASA. Been there roughly for about 2 months and maybe 2 weeks. So I'm still getting my feet wet, still learning everything about LASA. LASA is a very complex organization and a very critical organization when you think about what they provide in the whole homeless service system. To your question, I think there's a lot of different ways that social injustices have contributed sort of to homelessness or housing instability. I think about four, I call them the four-headed monsters when it comes to sort of oppression within the homeless sector. I think about historical racist policies, so one being redlining. I think about the generational sort of wealth divide when you look at blacks in comparison to whites, and even other folks of color in comparison to whites. I also think about the over-criminalization of black folks and also brown folks in these communities, which I think leads to a lot of different things that I believe was touched on by Zion's testimony that I thought was pretty important. And then I also think about the institutional bias. So I feel like when you look at redlining, which was critical in really sort of preventing us from being able to have those home loans to be able to secure homes and create sort of generational wealth that can be passed down through equity. Equity could be used in different ways to pay for college tuition. It's just such a critical form and economic opportunity and economic empowerment. And when you don't have that, I think it really creates a wedge. It creates this huge divide in wealth. And so you end up having a community that's a community of renters rather than homeowners. And two, you know, without that wealth, you create sort of concentrations of poverty, and the poverty in many ways is connected to the over policing and criminalization. So that creates what we all know now today as mass incarceration. And we know that was a systematic effort. And so when you think about mass incarceration, and what comes from that is now you have an individual who has a record, right? And having a record comes with so much stigma that you're not in the ability to find gainful employment. And so that puts you in a position to get pushed out of the society, right? Because now you can't be a contributive member of society, and you find yourself now, you know, searching for housing in different ways. And if you couple that with the fact, I believe in the 1970s, the deindustrialization of Los Angeles. So you have manufacturing jobs, manufacturing plants going out of the community. Now you have individuals who are now being over policed, who can't find work because work has now left the community. Now you're not in a position to provide for your household. That creates a lot of different sort of psychological barriers. You have the depression, you have all of those different mental health issues. Coupled with that, it's just a powder keg of dysfunction. And so when you find yourself, you know, now trying to get in a place of housing, you have to deal with the institutional sort of, you know, biases that come with that, right? So, you know, you're now an individual who's already been criminalized because of, you know, what you look like, and now you have a record that's been developed from mass incarceration, and we're not even talking about sort of the drug infestation that happened in the 1980s, right? That helped to precipitate, you know, the mass incarceration, which was connected to the 3 strikes bill that came out. So you have all of that. Now you're trying to find yourself to get housed. You're stigmatized. You have all these different biases working against you, and it's like, where's the equity? Where can I be treated with fair and equitable, you know, services so that I can be housed? And I think those 4-headed monsters, the racist policies, starting with the redlining, the generational, you know, wealth gap, you know, that's created from generation to generation, affecting different communities, the mass incarceration, and also the institutional bias within, you know, some of the programming has really been the catalyst to really create these conditions right now.
Look, I don't know, should I like holler? Should I just, you know, hand you a robe because you just preached a sermon? I don't know, but it was all for real, and I resonate with it. Our next session, which is going to be on the 29th, we're going to talk about that generational gap. And you said something about people not being able to get loans. That wasn't then. That's now. We're still dealing with everything that you talked about, you know, and for Black people, for brown people, for people who have been kissed by the sun, we deal with that. And that was all so real. Thank you so much for that. That was very powerful. So I'm excited to bring up my friend, my partner, my mentor, one of the Black women leaders of Los Angeles, the CEO of Sanctuary Hope, Janet Kelly. Come on up and join us. This is a perfect time to come on in here.
How you doing?
Janet, I'm good. Thank you so much. I thought I lost you, girl. You know, we ain't go nowhere without you.
I was in the audience. I was enjoying the conversation, listening to what was being laid down by Clifton and Kata.
Right. The audience, let me give some love over to the audience. And this chat is everything. For those of you who are watching this, you need to be right inside here because this chat is serious. So Janet, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us where do you think we're advancing social equity is in addressing housing insecurity?
Great. So my name is Janet Kelly, and I'm the Executive Director of Sanctuary Hope and also a member of Black Women Leaders of Los Angeles. So when I think about just everything of what has been said already about where I think we are advancing social justice in various arenas, I think it's really around what's happening on the ground floor. So kind of mentioned about Stay Housed LA, right? And even now we're even talking about how we're even reimagining what our communities look like. And even with LASA, we have the ad hoc committee on Black people experiencing homelessness. So that means right now, of course, that there's some synergy around addressing racial equity, social equity, racial justice, social justice as it relates to housing insecurity, right? And we know that that's happening because on the periphery, that's what's being said. And then we do know what's happening that's on the ground level, on the ground floor of this. But I think we're at a very monumental moment. You know how everyone talks about we're at a day of racial reckoning? I think we're in a moment and period of housing reckoning. And what that really looks like for people who are rent burdened, right? For those individuals who find themselves at odds within a legal system, especially when they're being evicted. Wakata was talking about the right to counsel in order to protect one's housing. But also, I think we're also, when we're talking about how we're advancing a lot of social justice issues around housing, we're also talking about the basic right to housing, right? Which is a whole huge movement in itself. I mean, one of the people that I love and respect very much is Tanya Toll, the former executive director of Beyond Shelter and also the CEO of Partnering for Change. And one of the things that she has said, and she always said and has continued to say for maybe the 25 years or more that I've known her, is that we need to create housing for everyone. Everyone should be afforded housing, whether you're wealthy, whether you're average income, whether you're low income or you're no income. Everyone should have some form of right to housing. And I think that is being laid right now. And now it's really up to us as individuals to really jump in on the movement and try to effectuate change as much as possible.
Absolutely. Housing is it's a human right. We should all have housing. People should not have to live on the streets or on the side of a freeway or under a freeway or just in an alley somewhere. Thank you so much for that. Kata, what trends are you seeing on the ground and on the phones?
Thank you, Candy. And just to give a little background, part of Stay Housed LA is we're a large network of, again, different community-based organizations. And we have canvassers on all of our teams, and we are on the phones. And we're calling folks across LA County. There's different ways that Stay Housed LA can be reached. We can be found on the link that I sent. People can call into that hotline number. And we're also actively calling people because this is connected to the proper education and prevention for eviction. So we call folks and we just let them know, hello, this is Stay Housed LA and we're a program with the county and we want to share with you some education about your rights as a tenant. We can't tell you everything on the phone, but we do have workshops for free, they're virtual. And it is the first time that I've heard, and I've done a lot of phone banking, just something that I've enjoyed since I was a younger person, and this kind of work that I've done, sometimes selling things, sometimes working on political campaigns, but I can tell you I've never answered the phone so many times to hear, or done calling on the phones to hear, I'm really glad you called today. Thank you for calling me. I do need this. I'm back on rent, or I'm dealing with harassment. So it's really the only phone banking experience I've had where I hear people on the other line happy to that, that we're calling from a kind of a canvassing or phone banking situation. And the trends that I've been hearing from other team members are things like people in debt. People are already under hardship and dealing with situations of the emergency under COVID, and that debt is not going to help them stay in their homes. So that needs to be addressed. Another trend that we're seeing is a lot of youth and young people taking lead in their family homes. I know that I was helping someone a few months ago, and it's the mother that's working to do what she needs to do to fill out her paperwork to get rental assistance. You have to, if you're background rent, if you're not able to complete rent right now, you have to fill out a declaration. There's a lot of paperwork, and it's the daughter that called back every day. I don't think we did this right. Can you help? What time is it? We don't have the right setup for our computer. So we're seeing a lot of youth take on household leadership to either the working outside the home to meet that financial gap, or they're trying to help their family members and the heavy burden of paperwork that's needed during this time.
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork, and they don't make the paperwork very easy, so I think if there's some way that we could streamline it, and I'm so thankful for people like you who are there to help people. So let me just clap up everyone, all of our first responders, all of the people who have been right there in the trenches willing to help people, because we've seen the mass number of people who have become homeless, who have lost their homes, who have lost their apartments because of COVID. So Clifton, can we talk about what ways can equity practices help to mitigate housing insecurities?
Yeah, I really think that equity practices can play a very significant role in mitigating housing insecurity. I think right now there's a huge emphasis in infusing equity within the strategic goals of organizations throughout not only government, public agencies, but even service providers. And it makes me think back to, I believe it was 2018 when the initial motion was passed for implicit bias and cultural competency training and implementation that was developed from Mark Ridley Thomas's office. I think that motion really set the stage and really called for organizations within the field to now use equity as a framework and at the center of everything that they do. And what that truly means is that when you look at hiring, when you look at promotions, when you look at policies, when you start looking at programs and projects, you have to make sure that you're taking into account gender identity, you're taking into account racial and ethnic makeup, you're taking into account all these different demographics to speak to fair and inclusive practices. And I think that's significant when we talk about mitigating homelessness, because now you create the mechanism to allow for different voices, right, to lead the direction of the organization in ways that can be powerful. So I think what was done in 2018 and what's going on across the homeless sector is moving towards a position of true equity power. And that means that groups that have, historically not been in a position to lead organizations, not only do they have that opportunity, but they're in partnership, right, with these leaders. They're thought partners, they're thought leaders. And I think that's significant because, and I think Janet talked about it earlier, about having sort of that voice from the ground to be able to shape, programs that make sense for the community, rather than, having the folks who are not in touch with the community shaping programs and policies that really, in many ways, continue sort of this inherent structural inequity. So I think equity practice is essential, and it's here to stay. It has to stay, and I think everyone is aware of that. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the success of the ad hoc committee of Black people experiencing homelessness. Can't say more about that committee. I think it's paved the way in so many different avenues.
Thank you so much for that. And it's true. In order to affect change, it cannot come from the top down, because those that are at the top are usually out of touch We need those people who are trusted, respected by the community, that are boots on the ground, that are doing the work, that showing up every day, that live in the community, that understand the culture, that look like the community. And let me just also be clear, just because you may be that, who may be of that race or that ethnicity, does not really mean that you understand fully. So you've got to be boots on the ground. You've got to be doing the work, and you have to be listed as a trusted community partner. And that's why I love and respect each one of you. Janet, where do you see the future efforts to curb housing insecurity and that will improve the lives of BIPOC communities?
Well, first I want to say, I think the efforts are currently underway. We're talking about our own county, which I believe is the first in the nation to put together an equity framework across the region, right? That says for all of our systems, we need to address inequities, and we are developing strategies to bring equity to the table. And part of that is anti-bias training, right? The other part of that is anti-Black racism. All of those things that have the wheels turning. But other efforts, when I think about it in terms of the housing landscape, is, you know, right now we're at a great opportunity where we're seeing a lot of leverage resources coming to the Los Angeles region, whether it's through the care relief bills that are coming from the Biden administration, to resources that are coming directly from the state of California, thanks to our governor and all of our legislators who work really hard to ensure that we receive additional dollars. And of course, you know, for us citizens of LA who voted for Measure H and HH, I mean, all of those have afforded us an opportunity to leverage resources. And I do want to say this one thing, because I think it's very important, because everyone seems to want to take an opportunity to throw a dagger at Measure H, or they want to throw a dagger at HHH. Let me tell you this, those investments and those dollars are working. We have housed more people than we ever have housed before, than if we had not had those dollars. Our homeless crisis, our housing insecurity crisis would be far greater than we could imagine. And so when I think about how we need to target even our resources in our thoughts around addressing housing insecurity, it's how do we put a lot of thought and effort around prevention? Because we really need to stop the inflow of individuals who are falling into homelessness. And a lot of that has to do with how do we address eviction prevention services, right? How do we address assisting people with earning a living wage? Because if we are talking about, we're dealing with being rent burdened, if we can't build enough affordable housing, then we need to look at whether our wages are commensurate enough for a person or individual to reside within our communities, right? Yes. And then I want to talk about what's happening that we see here in South LA and also in other communities that have been what we consider indigenous neighborhoods, right? Where displacement and corporate landlords are coming in and they're buying and they're raising the rents, and then our communities are being displaced. Yes. And so we need to do a lot of more organizing and galvanizing and mobilizing to address those issues head on, because reality is housing is a subsidy in a sense, right? Because we need it to subsist. And in order to subsist, you got to fight for it. Yes. You have to work for it. And you have to care, and this is the other part about it, you have to care about it beyond yourself. Because it's not just housing for you, it's housing for your children, it's housing for your grandma, it's housing for your cousin, It's housing for your employees. It's housing, it's literally housing for everyone.
Yes. Janet, I have one quick question for you in particular. So you
Yes.
say you have housed more people. Let's
Yes.
say 2 years ago.
Yes.
What's the percentage or the number, the difference that you're now doing as opposed to what you were before?
So I can tell you pre kind of Measure H, all of that, we're maybe able to house, and I'm talking about moving young people into permanent housing, about 20 young people a year. That was before Measure H.
Okay.
Now we're on average, we're moving up to almost 125 young people.
Wow. Wow.
And that's with Measure H dollars, that's with private philanthropy. It's all of those things that are necessary, because it's not even for us. The difference is that once we house a young person, we're with, I mean, on average, young people are with us about 3.5 years. So once they're in a home, they're not in a home alone. They're in a home with a mentor. They're in a home with a support system. They can come back and consistently access services, because the ultimate goal is to ensure that the long-term stability is there for that person. And even if it's a young person or an adult, that's what our ultimate goal is. We want people to be able to get on their feet and be able to self-sustain. And even if they're not able to self-sustain, and I always say this, recidivism is okay, because you could fall back, you could fall out, but fall into a support system, right? Fall into your church, fall into your club, fall into your girls' club, fall into your boys' club, fall into something so that you're not alone. And housing is really about not being at it alone.
Wow, thank you so much. And I know the work that you do. I have seen it, I have witnessed it, and I am so thankful for you. And I'm thankful for those dollars and those funders. And let me just take a moment and say right here, for all of you that are watching on Facebook, for those of you that are here, if you can make a donation, and a donation of $5, $10 a month, a week, a day, a donation of $50 or $100, $1,000, that's a game changer. So whether you're going to make that donation to Positive Results Center, or to Sanctuary of Hope, or to SAGE, or any of the other organizations that's been represented, not only here today, but during our series, it is really a game changer, and it is a blessing, because the need is great. Reach out to your elected officials, reach out to the organizations you work for. If you work for a corporation, they donate. So tell them about these organizations, tell them about us. And if you can't remember who it was, reach out to us and we'll tell you who our partners are that could utilize the funding. So Kata, I'm getting to your last question. Time flies by so quickly. We only have 8 minutes before 7 o'clock, and I have to do a quick closing. So I'd like you all to take a moment, maybe 2 minutes each. Yeah, about a minute and a half, and answer your final question, as well as maybe any final statements. So Kata, for you, how can people become involved?
Campaign Right to Counsel to support
Wait,
this.
I'm sorry,
House.
Kata,
Yes.
I'm sorry, we did not hear the first thing you said.
Okay.
So could you start over?
Yes, there's a couple of great ways to be involved. The first I would say is, if you get a call from one of our canvassers from State House to LA, just thank them for being on the phones and doing that boots on the ground work. It would be a joy to be the person on the other end calling you all after getting to spend the evening with you. If you move to volunteer, a lot of the organizations that we might, SAGE included, and then there's Social Justice Learning Institute, many other groups have a volunteer capacity to also get on the phones if you feel moved to do so. So that's the work on the phones, right? The boots on the ground part. And then there's the part of the change making and that education, the policy, that prevention piece, which is the campaign Right to Counsel. There's a community meeting that's virtual every fourth Friday of the month. So I'm going to put those links in the chat. And if you feel moved to join a Right to Counsel virtual call, it's again the fourth Friday of every month. So you can see on their website. And if you happen to join, just shout out in the chat, say, "Is Katya here? I just want to say hi." It'd be a joy to see you there. And last, we work with so many different community-based organizations, and all of us cover a different neighborhoods across LA County. So I'm just going to put in SAGE's information, where we work in South LA, and I'm going to put in the Social Justice Learning Institute, which works in Inglewood. So it's just 2, but there's about 20 of us, 20 different community organizations working hard to give out information around tenant rights in LA. So thank you so much for having me.
And one thing before you go, if you could just quickly tell either an email or a phone number for those people who are watching on Facebook, Kata.
Great, sure. I will put my email in the chat.
Okay, awesome. So thank you very much, Kata. It has been a pleasure. Next, let's go ahead and have Mr. Clifton Trotter. Your last question is, what role does the city, county government, agency, service providers play in solving housing insecurity? And know that you have about a minute and a half.
Okay, I'll try to be lean here. I think all of those different entities play a very critical role. I think when government, public agencies, community organizations and service providers can collaborate in very effective ways, I think it can bring about transformative change. I think earlier we talked about the county's sort of equity framework, which is a framework that tackles looking at policy, looking at budgeting, looking at hiring, looking at relationships with community stakeholders. I think that's a framework that that can be replicated. It can be replicated within different government agencies. It can be replicated with service organizations, community organizations, and I think that leads sort of the charge in ensuring that social justice and equity are at the center of everything that we do. And I think when we move in that direction, I think we can really affect housing and homelessness in very tremendous ways. I think too, it's looking at looking at things with a different lens. I think again, the creation of the ad hoc committee was important. It was very vital, especially we look at it from a national landscape, because it began to start the conversation that folks are not homeless because of some individual misfortune. There's different structural inequities that are at place that are creating, these environments. And we see it in the disproportionate rate that it affects African Americans and also Native Americans. And so I think it's important that we lead with this new analysis, and leading with this new analysis is going to inform a lot of things that we do across the sector. And so I really think that's pivotal in stemming the tide in homelessness. And so I think, these different organizations have to work together.
Thank you so much, Clifton. You have been a source of knowledge. You have been inspirational. I thank you so much. We're going to definitely have to have you and some of these other speakers come back, because there's so many different layers and levels of this conversation, and you brought a lot of light to it. And I thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Candy. Really appreciate it.
Really appreciate you too. And last but not least, my friend, my mentor, Black woman leader of Los Angeles, super amazing woman, Janet Kelly. Janet, your last question is, where should we begin to address the drivers of housing insecurity? And Janet, you got about a minute to answer that.
Well, I'm going to keep it very quick, because really when we talk about the drivers, we need to really start really saying that we are truly going to dismantle systemic racism. And that dismantling starts with our intentions, our deeds, and our actions, right? So that's how we're really going to start addressing it. But I also wanted to say is that we also need to look at ourselves individually, and we've got to care. We have to care on a community level. We have to care on an individual level. We have to care on a resource level. All of those things that play an integral part of addressing housing insecurities. And of course, we need to start at home, home base. Home base means when my mom would say, if Uncle Eddie was not feeling so well and Uncle Eddie ended up out on the streets or on the side of the road, the whole community came together to ensure that Uncle Eddie had a place to stay, right? Because we need to recognize too, even in these conversations, government cannot do it all. And some of us hold some personal responsibility, personal accountability when it comes to homelessness, right? Whether you're out there and you're assisting with advocacy, or you're opening up your place, or if you're a landlord, you're opening up opportunities for people who have rental subsidies to have a place to stay, or if you're a landlord and you have vacant properties, offering those properties up as an opportunity for people who can get at least a foot in the door and reestablish a housing history. All of those things become intricately important for the home base to be home for everyone.
Wow, Janet, that was so real. Thank you so much for caring. If you didn't say anything else, that is where I want to end your conversation and begin my thank you to the audience. So first off, thank you, Janet, for caring. Thank you for caring about me, because honestly, PRC and Candy Lewis would not be where we are if it were not for you caring about us. And I love and appreciate you. So thank you.
I love you too.
Thank you. So I want to say thank you to all of our speakers. The conversation has been rich. I wish we could go on for another 5 days, because we could, but time is of the essence. So I just want to say thank you. I'm not going to reiterate everything that was said, but I do believe what Janice said, that we have to start at home. We have to care. I asked Tiffany and Zion earlier, how did people look at them when they were homeless? And I need you all to really consider that the people that you see on the streets could be your family members, and many of them are your neighbors. We know for a fact that when people lose their home or their apartment, they go just a few blocks, if that, away from their neighborhood, because that's where they feel safe. That is where they relate. So when you see someone, don't think about, dang, just think about, how can I assist? How can I support? Even if it is but giving them a smile, letting them know that you see them, making a meal, volunteering at one of the organizations, donating to one of the organizations. And for all of the funders, the organizations, the corporations, donate, support, and invest in your community-based organizations. They are the trusted leaders. For those of you who have ever experienced housing insecurity, I hope and pray that you still are not, but I hope that you are finding the resources that you need. And what we are trying to do is really just share knowledge. We don't pretend to be the expert. I'm bringing the experts to you. For those of you who have the opportunity, if you are a landlord, please consider renting your property to someone who really does need it. And let's do something for real. All of you elected officials, let's do something about people who are investing or buying up property and then boosting up the rents. That is unacceptable. Housing should be affordable for everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much for your time. We've gone over a little bit. I thank you so much for being here. In our chat as our or our speakers' information. And if you have not had an opportunity to include your information in, please do so. If you're interested in participating in one of our panel discussions or having a lounge, you can reach us at info@prc123.org, or you can reach me, Candy, that's Kandele, at prc123.org. Go right now to our website and register for our next event, which is on Thursday, April 29th, and that's on wealth inequities. We'd also like you to bring a friend. Don't come alone. This conversation is too rich. As you saw, the conversation that was in the chat was amazing. I thank all of you who are here today that have put your comments in the chat. We are going to be researching them, reading them, and putting together a report on everything that is happening. I'd like to thank our ASL. They have provided a phenomenal service. Thank you so much. To the PRC team, to my mother, Daisy Newsom, who shows up for everything I do. I love and appreciate you. And to our sponsors, let me start again with thanking, before I thank our sponsors, let me just say, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, we're sorry you weren't able to join us. We look forward to you joining us on our next presentation or whenever your schedule allows. Everyone, please come back. And now I'd like to say thank you, because if it were not for our sponsors, we couldn't do this. So thank you so very much. Southern California Gas Company, SoCal Gas. We'd like to thank Kaiser Permanente, LA Care, Vermont Slauson Economic Development Corporation, Supervisor Hilda Solis, Los Angeles Business Journal, Forgiving for Living, that's Wendy Gladney, and she is also one of our Black women leaders. The Neighborhood Housing Services, Mac Enterprises, that's Arnetta Mack. She's also one of our Black women leaders. Sweet Life, the Kinsey Collection, and of course, my sisters, the Black women leaders of Los Angeles. And to each one of you who have been here today, I thank you so very much. Ashley and Aaron in backstage, I appreciate you. Couldn't do it without it. So thank you all. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks, 5:30 p.m. on April the 29th for Wealth and Equities. Thank you and have a blessed and beautiful day.